Multiple summits, we've seen that before. The president talking about this possible summit on June 12th, and if it stays, talking to Reuters on Air Force One. I'd like to see it done in one meeting, but oftentimes that's not the way the deal works. There's a very good chance that it won't be done in one meeting or two meetings or three meetings, but it'll get done at some point. I look forward to seeing the letter, and I look forward to June 12th, where hopefully we can make progress. I'd like to see a total denuclearization in as quick a period of time as practicable. You're talking about machinery, you're talking about things that can't necessarily happen immediately, but they can happen in as rapid a fashion as they can happen. That's what I want to happen. Let's bring in our panel. Start there. Jonathan Swan, national political reporter for Axios. Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. And Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post. So I sense there's a kind of a setting of expectations here of what could be a first in a series that they don't think that they're going to get it all in one.
I talked to a senior White House official yesterday about this, and they said that they're still, hoping that it's June 12th, but there is still some uncertainty. They're working through details with North Korea. It could be pushed out by a few days. And, of course, who knows? It's Kim Jong-un. Something could happen between now and then that blows the whole thing up. So
it's pretty significant that this top guy is coming with a
letter
to the Oval Office. Very
significant. And they are working under the assumption that this is going to happen. The president wants it to happen. And even the skeptics on his team, like John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, know that the president sees a path here, and they're not fighting the decision.
It obviously doesn't matter the date of June 12th. It matters what they get out of it. And if they get out of it.
Right. But there's this pattern in history where you have a really long lead up to a meeting. You work out, you negotiate what exactly will be discussed, and then you hope for the best that will happen at a meeting. One gets the sense here, and it's possibly because we've had such bad communication with this other country going back, that maybe just meeting and getting things started right away will be helpful, even though I don't think you can imagine that terribly much will be accomplished so early that it will take further meetings and more hashing out. And we did hear before Trump canceled the meeting that North Korea had kind of proposed similar things along the lines of what they proposed in the past, where they get a big bundle of money in exchange for promising to do something. I don't think that's going to really satisfy the U.S. negotiators this time around.
And he says he'll get up off the table. Meantime, the Russians are making a move to North Korea.
He sends his warmest regards and best wishes in the big endeavors that have been initiated on the Korean Peninsula with your participation.
The situation on the Korean Peninsula is changing according to the interests of two countries. I'm glad that Putin's government is acting in opposition to the domination of the United States. We are always ready to negotiate with the Russian side.
Peace, stability, and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula and in Southeast Asia in general are in our interests.
So Foreign Minister Lavrov, warm and fuzzy with Kim Jong-un, clearly sending a message that we're still around.
We're still around. We're still on your border. We want to know what's going on. There's these big events or whatever that was on the Korean Peninsula, and it seems like it's getting serious between you and Donald Trump. What I think is very interesting about that little meeting is it shows that Kim Jong-un has somehow managed to put himself, it's almost like he's courting, he's sort of the most eligible bachelor or whatever in Northeast Asia, and everybody's kind of coming to him to see what he wants and what we can do to make you happy and trying to get influence with him. And I think that's a very strong position for him to be in. The United States has quite openly said, if you do business with us, if you give us what we want, we are prepared to guarantee your safety, make you rich. I think the president even said make you happy. And that is a very sweet offer that probably alarms the Russians and the Chinese a little bit at the idea that maybe the United States, my gosh, will turn out to be the most influential power right here in Northeast Asia over time. And they're moving to check that.
In the meantime, we are still checking the Russia probe on a lot of different fronts. The president tweeting today, a number of tweets, but this one, not that it matters, but I never fired James Comey because of Russia. The corrupt mainstream media loves to keep pushing that narrative, but they know it is not true. That prompted a lot of looking into sound bites, like this one from NBC.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
So what was the deal with that tweet storm, Jonathan? To figure out the White House response?
No, they're not really talking much on this. I actually did some reporting today on other conversations Trump's been having privately, been pressuring Jeff Sessions for the best part of a year over this. They're just not talking about it. I don't think there is a particularly good answer for that comment there.
Great answer to that.
What is it?
If you do the clip just a little bit longer, he talks a little bit more about how he knows that firing Comey might actually extend the Russia investigation, but it still must be done. That clip is not that difficult to understand. He's saying that he didn't like how James Comey was privately assuring him that he was not the target of a Russia investigation, while publicly suggesting to the world that he was, that even though James Comey was doing these J. Edgar Hoover-like games that were being played and that it might cause him trouble on the Russia investigation, he still needed to fire him because he was so bad at his job and because he was bad for the American people. And I think particularly with what we've learned about James Comey in the year since that interview was given, which I think was just about a year ago, now we really should have a clear understanding of what he was saying there.
Sure. But they don't have you talking for them, and they don't have you explaining it. And when the tweet comes out, it's not that clear. So a lot of times you have to read between
I will not disagree with you that they could do a much better job messaging what was being said there by, for instance, just putting out what that whole interview with Lester Holt showed.
Yeah. Meantime, Rudy Giuliani is going after Trey Gowdy on what he said about the informant or the spy or whatever you want to call him. Take a listen.
I want to see the documents which Trey Gowdy has never seen, which is outrageous. And I'm not going to let my client testify, the President of the United States, even if he wants to, without those documents being produced, if and when we find that this was handled appropriately. And there's some evidence on which they could base this phony investigation. Will we have him testify?
Chuck.
Well, Trey Gowdy did deliver at least in PR terms, a very heavy blow to the Trump position in this by coming forward and essentially blessing the Mueller investigation in this, or sorry, the FBI investigation prior to Mueller during the election in this one respect. And so obviously they're pushing back very hard. I think, if I may step back for a moment, what Giuliani is doing is kind of a piece, I thought, with the Trump tweet today. They're kind of preparing the ground on all sorts of different areas for what might be the eventual confrontation with Mueller, the eventual testimony. And I think they're trying to sort of lay down markers about, like, okay, here is our version of events, here is our version of the facts. Trey Gowdy ran afoul of that, so they pushed back.
Well, I just want to point out that I wrote at the Federalist that Trey Gowdy actually didn't even see all of the subpoenaed documents that Congress is seeking to understand more about the use of this informant. He also seemed confused about whether it was a criminal probe. He kept saying, well, we don't use the term spy in criminal probes, but we should all know now, because James Comey testified about this in March 2017, this wasn't a criminal probe. This was a counterintelligence probe. And the use of spies is common in a counterintelligence probe. Whether you think that should be what we do to political opponents during a campaign, I think is really something that people should really be discussing and thinking through and knowing so much more about, whether they are congressional investigators, internal watchdogs, or people in the media.
But when Trey Gowdy has these meetings and agreed that they didn't bring any documents, and they have a classified debriefing, and they explain what they were doing, and he comes out and says, you should be proud of what the FBI was doing at the time, and you would expect that. How is that interpreted any other way?
Well, I'm not entirely sure how to explain what Trey Gowdy was saying, although he does have a history of being very much a fan of the FBI. But he also conflated what he was saying in these interviews about what President Trump himself had said when James Comey first presented to him information about the Russians, which was, of course, after the election. He said he would like it fully investigated. And Gowdy said, well, this means that it was, of course, okay to run an informant against your campaign. And I don't think that, and he further said that the American people support the use of informants. I don't think he actually has a good grasp on what American people think about running informants on political campaigns. I
want to get to the other panel and trade, and we'll only have a quick amount of time, but Jonathan, also today, the pardon of Dinesh D'Souza, the president indicates that he is possibly considering a pardon of Martha Stewart and Rod Blagojevich. His opponents, some of them saying that this is an indication, Mark Warner and others saying the president's ad hoc use of pardon power is concerning enough. But the possibility that he may also be sending a message to witnesses in a criminal investigation into his campaign is extremely dangerous. In the United States of America, no one is above the law. Is a pardon, or is a pardon a message?
I'm a reporter, so I need facts, and this is the same thing as before. I can only report what I know for a fact, and I don't have any evidence that Trump has said that to anyone privately. So for me to say, yes, that's what he's thinking, it would be pure speculation out of thin air.